Hello and welcome to this video in our series, How to Build Generational Wealth. What we're dealing with specifically in this video is why making money is so difficult. The reason making money is so difficult is because the system is configured against you. Okay, and the direction in which life progresses is towards greater disorder. In physics and in science in general, we call this entropy. And I'll explain in a minute what entropy is. But the Bible calls it a curse, and this is a curse that happened in Genesis 3 from verses 15 to 19. Basically, entropy says things happen spontaneously in the direction of greater disorder. When you have a house and you don't, continue with the upkeep, what's going to happen? It's going to go into a state of disrepair. What happens when you have a garden that you don't attend to? It goes into a state of chaos and disrepair. That's what we call entropy. Entropy really means things happen spontaneously in the direction of greater disorder. In other words, for things to be successful, to happen the way you want, you need to put in order. That means you need to be devoted to your goal. That's the very first step. First step. And secondly, results follow this sequence. One, intentionality, what you devoted to. Two, its resources, and three is a process that you have to follow. Another way of saying the same thing is that the main problem with the reason that we're struggling so much is we're not really that devoted to our goals. I mean, if you look at this meal, this didn't just happen by itself. It took somebody to say, this is what I want to see happen, etc. And they followed a particular way of doing things. But the big question is, why are you not devoted to your goals? And the fundamental reason that a lot of people are not devoted to their goals is because of fear. Now, we respond to fear in one of three prominent ways. One, we fight whatever causes the fear. If there's danger coming through, you fight, or you flee, that's flight, or you freeze. Okay, you just stop and hope things will get better by themselves. But what psychologists tell us is most fears are irrational. Okay, and it's one thing to be fearful of a snake, but it's another matter to be fearful of giving a speech to a large group, and where particularly that speech is important for you achieving your goals. But now the main thing about fear bullies us. And the reason it bullies us is it wants us to give up our power. Now think of what the bully does. A bully basically terrorizes the one who's been bullied. And really think about it this way. Fear's job is to say, don't do what you could do to improve the situation. Because basically fear tries to paralyze you. It doesn't want you to do anything. And if you give in to fear, you're basically giving away your power. I've read a lot of books about how the mind works, but the one I recommend the most is this one put forward by Professor Steve Peters. He's a psychiatrist. And basically, this is what it comes down to. Your psychological mind has got two main centers. One center he calls the chimp short for chimpanzee. And that's because the chimp is a very emotional thinking machine. It's like a child. You look at something, you make a decision. I want this one, or I don't want this one. And if you don't get what you want, you perform. That's what children do. That's what a chimpanzee does in the wild. So that chimp is wired for survival. Okay, and it looks at the situation and makes a very blanket assessment. Look, here we have danger, or here things are looking good. So it's what that instinct when you look at a person, say, I don't like this person, or you look at a person, I like, that's the chimp at play. But the human is the part that looks at things very logically, almost like a scientist. But the human is wired for integration into society. Now the chimp thinks like it does in the wild, okay, like a chimpanzee would do in the wild. So the two don't always see eye to eye. Now, what happens when there's a stimulus, when something happens? Information goes to the chimp first, and the chimp will make an evaluation. Is this life threatening? If it's not, then it hands over to the human. It will always say, this is what I think we need to do, but the human can make a decision. No, I don't think we need to do that because that's not appropriate or whatever. Now, your responsibility as a human is to manage your chimp. Because if you don't manage your chimp, the chimp will be restless and you will find things happening that are not particularly very good for you. Now, I suggest that you get yourself a copy of the book. It is fascinating and you will not regret it. Now, how do you manage fear? Now, let's use the example of a snake handler. The picture of a snake here is a black mamba. It's called the kiss of death, right? Now, snake handlers move towards the snake when the rest of us run away when we see a snake. Why does that happen? What makes it easy or simpler for the snake handler to do? To move towards the danger that the rest of us are moving away from. It's the same thing with a firefighter. We run away from the firefighter moves towards the fire. But really, there's a sequence of things, the series of things that make it possible for these kinds of people to do the things that the rest of us are afraid of. First one is they have made the decision, okay, to take back their power. So remember what the role of fear? Fear's job is to say, do nothing about the situation that can improve your situation, that can improve your life. Okay. And so that's what fear does. But you saying, I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to allow fear to control me. So that's the first thing. You take authority. Okay. You make a decision that I'm going to take authority over the situation. Number two, you need to master the basics of how the situation, for example, when you deal with snakes, how do snakes work? When you deal with fire as a firefighter, how does fire work? So you got to understand when you deal with heavy duty pylons of electricity, how does electricity work? You got to understand those principles. And from understanding the principles, you know what to do and you know what not to do. Okay. And number three, you get results through applying the principles. That's how you enforce authority. You apply the principles. Okay. And what I always say to people is make sure that the results are used for a higher purpose. Because what happens, and you see when you talk about money, people tend to fall short, or they get arrogant and they get bitten by snakes, or they get destroyed by fire. So make sure that you do not become arrogant at all. Now we're talking here about money. Now, how do you deal with the situation when it comes to money? Think about it. Most of us start work when we're about in our early 20s, but by the time we start, we already have preconceived money ideas, like ways of how money works, and a lot of those things are not particularly good. Okay, so we're already playing catch up, and the problem with playing catch up when we don't understand the rules of the game is we do what seems to be appropriate, and very often we're being controlled by fear again. So what you need to be doing, again, like a snake handler, make a decision. Money will no longer bully me. So basically you're taking back authority. Now there's a difference between authority and power. There's a video that explains the difference in a lot more detail, but here the point is you take authority and authority gives you power. Okay. And that's the first step. The second step is you need to become good at how money works. In other words, master the basics. You got to understand how money works. Okay, just like a snake handler needs to understand how snakes operate, because if you don't, that snake will kill you. Okay, if you don't understand how money works, you will forever be struggling. Always playing catch up. And number three, again, we say you enforce the authority. How do you enforce authority? You apply the principles, and that's how you get results. Okay, if this is how money works, you got to understand and apply those principles, because if you don't apply them, it's not going to help you. Okay, and again, you need to serve the ecosystem. This is an important one, because a lot of people do things right. They become successful financially, or they become successful in different ways, and then they become arrogant. They think they're successful because they're special, but you're successful because whether you're aware of it is because you're applying principles. And the arrogance is what gets a lot of people in trouble later on. Okay, so the challenge here for you is this: identify your money patterns. Okay, just don't just allow yourself to say, okay, this is what my parents handed down for me when it comes to money. This is what I've absorbed from my environment. Sit down and say, why do I believe what I believe? And are my beliefs aligned with principles? And if your beliefs are wrong, it's important that you change them, because a belief that's not right is not going to help you very much. Now, you can download this from my website, and the address will be on the screen here below. Now, money follows solutions to problems. And I hear a lot of people saying, do what you love and money will follow. It does not work that way. Money follows solutions to pertinent problems. Okay, and of course, if you love something, it's easier for you to do it. But you need to make sure that you provide solutions. People come to you for solutions. They don't come to you because you enjoy what you're doing. Okay, and so you need to manage your fear scripts, and that's what we're talking about here. And you need to become courageous. You know, if there's one refrain that comes through over and over from the Bible. You know what that is? Something that God says over and over to us human beings is do not be afraid. Do not fear. In other words, be courageous. And that's what you need because you have fear working against you. If you allow it, it'll paralyze you. Okay. And you need to be devoted to your goals. I think that's the step number one that we spoke about earlier. And you find a partner, and I always say to people, if you're going to work with somebody, two things are critical. Make sure that you have a shared value system and make sure that you have a shared vision. Okay. I may be going from here to there. Perhaps the person is going further down, but at least there's commonality because no amount of contracts will help you. If you're working with somebody who is out to scam you. Now, this is really an outline of the model that we cover. It's a roadmap. So I'm not going to go into detail because we go into it in a lot more detail in different videos because you can see it's quite extensive. The key thing that I'd like you to be aware of is this. Number one, it starts with what you have in your hand. Number two, the way to wealth is through using these two instruments. One is time. By virtue of being alive, it means you have time. Two is you need to have assets. So you need to give your time an assignment through your assets. Get assets as early as possible. And then the power of compounding will help you build wealth. In a nutshell, I think we're not going to go into detail because we go into that a lot more in other videos. The answer to the question, why is making money so difficult, is because I've said, because of entropy, the curse. And there's a video that explains that in a lot more detail. But specifically is because you allow money to bully you. You are afraid. Fear is what makes you give your power over to money. And you need to change that by number one, making a decision that I'm going to appropriate my, I'm going to take my authority back. I'm not going to allow money to continue to bully me the way it has. Two, I'm going to learn how money works. Okay, that's what we doing with this series to explain the different concepts to make it easy for you to understand what you need to be doing. And number three, you got to apply the principles. In other words, enforce the authority that you have. And number four, do not become arrogant. Make sure that you serve the ecosystem with the results that you're getting. Okay, don't ever become arrogant. I hope you found this video helpful, but remember this is part of a series of videos and we taking like them in like bite-sized chunks. And if you want more details, there's a book that explains everything in a lot more detail. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.